All righty. So I think we can get started. So good morning and welcome on behalf of USCIS, IRIS, and the Office of Contracting. Thank you for coming out to Falcon, which I have to read this because it's a really long name. Fast, Agile Lifecycle for Continuous Verification, Operations, and Next Gen. So thank you for coming. We really appreciate your interest. Few little logistical details. Bathrooms out the door and to the right. Please make sure that you don't wander around the building. This is a secure location. You'll need an escort. So just make sure that you find somebody with a lanyard to make sure that you're not wandering around, okay? Silence your phones, please. While we're here, we will have a presentation. We've also got people joining us online, so we don't want to interrupt. It's hard enough to hear, as you well know, through all the Zoom media. And we will have a question and answer period at the end. So we've got microphones strategically located. Please make sure that you speak up. Give us your name, what company you represent, and then ask your question. We will have a back and forth between online questions and in-person questions. And we'd like to have Jerry come up. He is the NCR section chief and will talk to us about some security.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome everyone to our facility here at the headquarters at Camp Springs. I'll try to be as quick as possible so you guys can continue with your event for the day. If you came in through the rear lobby and that's where you turned in your badge, please make sure as you exit that you get your ID cards from the rear lobby. And if you came in from the front, because I know there were some people that we moved around, please make sure that you get your ID cards from the front when you turn in your badge. I do appreciate everybody's patience and understanding as we went through our security process this morning. Let's face it, in this geopolitical environment, safety is paramount, and it is our responsibility as your security team to make sure that you guys are safe while you're here. Speaking of safety, if for any reason there is an alarm, fire alarm, whatever it may be, and the PA system announces that an evacuation will take place, everybody in here will have to evacuate and go into the garage area. On the second floor, there is a sign, or there are multiple signs that says Tomish Center. That'll be the area where you guys will assemble, and we'll get a good accountability to make sure everybody's safe. If the announcement is for shelter in place, this is probably the safest place for you to remain. So shelter in place, remain here, evacuation, garage, second floor. If you have any issues throughout the day while you're here, please let us know, and we'll dispatch our team to make sure that you get taken care of, whether it be a medical emergency or if you have just general questions. Unless you guys have anything for me, enjoy your day here and enjoy your event. Thank you.
All right, so I'd first like to introduce our panel. We have Tammy Meckley. She is the Associate Director of Immigration Records and Identity Services. Amy Wheelock, she is Chief of Verification. Pablo Juarez, Branch Chief of Verification in OIT. Mariah Doolittle, Product Management and Delivery Branch Chief. Stuart Sellers is the Associate Chief of Office of Contracting, and I am Rhonda Cannell, and I am a contracting officer in OCON. And I would like to turn it over to Tammy.
Thank you so much for being here today. It's great to see the room filled and lots of familiar faces and former colleagues from USCIS, so it feels a little bit like old home week, which is fantastic. I want to just touch a little bit on the two programs, the main portfolio that you're going to hear Pablo talk about when we get to the technical requirements and qualifications, because I think it's really important for you to understand the two public-facing programs that we're going to talk about today in terms of finding a business partner in industry to support us on very critical government services that we provide to the public. So the first two programs, and Rhonda's going to take care of the slides, are the SAVE program and the E-Verify program. And I'll talk just a very brief overview and then some of our strategic priorities and the direction that we're taking both of these programs. Not sure the other contracts that you all have supported in terms of development efforts, but these programs and my expectations are continuous improvement. We have to continue to look at how we are providing the services to make sure that those we do serve we're doing it as efficiently and effectively as possible. And I'll go into the details in terms of why. And many of you probably already have some background about the programs. So first and foremost, the SAVE program. So a lot of public benefit granting agencies come to USCIS asking us to provide information, immigration information about individuals. This is about immigration status, this is employment authorization, and it's, whether or not somebody is naturalized or derived. We do not vet U.S. born citizens through the SAVE program. This is about those who have naturalized or derived and became citizens. It is not a source system, so there isn't, unfortunately, a lot of people don't understand and they think that SAVE is this huge database of a lot of immigration information. It is not. SAVE is dependent and reliant on lots of different data sources to cull and pull together information that determines one's immigration status in the United States. And so we have lots of different partners, Department of State, ICE, CBP, obviously lots of internal systems to USCIS. So if you think about the continuum and the life cycle of immigration, it's any and all data, even those who are in removal proceedings or might have an immigration court date scheduled. All of that information we take into consideration when one of the public benefit granting agencies comes to us and we provide that information back to them. Another very important point when it comes to SAVE is we do not adjudicate the public benefit. We simply provide the information to the state, local, or public benefit granting agency. They take that into consideration with everything else that they do in terms of their public benefit adjudication, and they use that to make a decision. We don't know who is granted a benefit, and we don't know who is denied a benefit. But what we do know is that we need to get that information to those public benefit granting agencies most timely, and that is the role of the SAVE program. But many of the agencies are required by law to actually gather immigration information to use in that decision-making process. The sister program is E-Verify. You probably know a lot more about. E-Verify is the program that a lot of employers enroll with the E-Verify program to determine one's work authorization status in the United States. It is predominantly a voluntary program. Employers will come to us and ask to use the program, but it is required in some instances. Consistent with the FAR, federal government contractors are required to use it in many instances. Federal agencies are required to use it, and a lot of states have enacted state law requiring employers, some groups of employers in some states, all employers, to enroll and use E-Verify. For me, the E-Verify value proposition is the information that one submits on their Form I-9, which every employee has to do every time they are hired to work. That information from the I-9 is ingested into E-Verify, and we go back and determine and tell the employer whether or not that individual is work authorized, or if there's a mismatch of information that the employee must correct before they can be found work authorized in the United States. The value proposition here is, in this day and age, having an employer looking at a physical document and trying to determine whether or not that document is fraudulent or is a good document is difficult to do. And so the E-Verify value proposition is it's the data that we take and extract and we validate against the authoritative issuing sources of those documents, whether it's a driver's license in most states, whether it is with the Social Security Administration, whether it's Department of State and passport information, or a green card or an EAD that USCIS has issued. So that gives the employers a lot more confidence in their hiring of individuals. And so that's why you see a lot of employers joining the program on a voluntary basis. Some of the business context here, and I mentioned a few of this, but again, I want to just describe the scope, the magnitude, and the complexity of these two programs. I've already said they're both public facing. There's a lot of focus on E-Verify and SAVE, regardless of the administration. So if you look at the numbers here, it's millions and millions of queries that are submitted through our intake channels for us to either go back with, immigration status information to the public benefit granting agencies, or go back and tell an employer whether or not somebody is work authorized. So I just wanted to give you some of the statistics here so you can see, again, the magnitude, the scope, and the complexity of these programs. And they grow every single day, every week, every month, every year. So this isn't, we have a category of employers and benefit granting agencies. This is constantly expanding, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. In terms of the priorities, clearly this is a very fast-paced environment. There's a lot of, as I mentioned, it's very visible at the highest levels through and including the White House and Congress. And we have to be very nimble and flexible. There's a lot of changes. Every time there is a change, whether it's a change that is, dictated by the White House or the administration or even internal to USCIS, that has to do with one's immigration status. Those policy changes have cascading effects and downstream effects on the E-Verify and SAVE programs. When it comes to what data is captured, where is that data stored? How do we make sure that our verification information system is able to link and pull and integrated with where all of that data is stored to make sure, again, we're getting back to employers most quickly and we're getting back to benefit granting agencies most quickly. So there's a few priorities that I've been talking about. These are priorities that, are priorities this year. They're going to be priorities of next year, and they'll probably be priorities that continue, that we continue to focus on in the coming years. First and foremost is our Next Gen E-Verify initiative. Some of this information is out there publicly. We've got some different videos on YouTube. You can check those out. But this is really us taking a step back and saying, we've been running this E-Verify program for a long time. What should it be now? What should it look like? How do we incorporate the learning and the experience into the future state of E-Verify, knowing that this program is growing at a rapid pace? We just recently issued a new Form I-9 regulation that said to employers, if you want to do remote document identity inspection, join E-Verify and meet this other criteria. We're seeing an uptick in employers who are saying, yes, we'd like to do that. We're no longer all in brick and mortar locations. How do we validate one's work authorization status? Well, we do this remotely, and they can come up with different ways of doing that. So again, just giving you an example of policy change, reg change, how did that impact the E-Verify program? So we're seeing a significant increase in enrollments. So Next Gen is really reimagining and looking at how do we integrate fully and automate the Form I-9 process, the piece that the employee does, the piece that the employer does, the piece that they then ingest into E-Verify, and how do we get that work credential into the hands of the individual most quickly, and giving the actual employee a lot more stake in their work authorization in the United States. So really looking at apps and allowing them to complete that Form I-9 on a phone, share it with the employer, share it with the E-Verify program, and then as quickly as possible, let that employee know if they're work authorized in the United States. That's the ultimate goal of Next Gen E-Verify. I could probably spend this entire hour and a half talking about that, but I won't. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of context around the direction we are taking. Again, it speaks to the complexity, the magnitude, and what I'm looking for in an industry partner in terms of continuing to focus on program improvement. And this is one initiative that we're focusing on. And clearly, over 50% of the employers that use E-Verify are web-based employers, web-based clients. So ICAs are really important in our world. Every time we make changes, we've got to be able to push that ICA out and get employers to adopt that as quickly as possible so they can benefit from the new functionality, the capability, the enhancements. So the employers are actually getting the value, the business value that we intend. PCIS integration, person-centric identity service integration. This is a huge one for me. I mentioned to you, we've got all these disparate systems that have pieces and parts of one's immigration status. Our person-centric identity service, which is also led by IRIS, a different division within my directorate, we have developed this piece of service which links all of the information about an individual together. Biographic information, biometric information. This is now a service. We're still building on it. We're still adding data elements to it, but this is a service that we need to get integrated with the verification information system as quickly as possible. And again, the ultimate goal is the more integrity in the data, the better our integration, the quicker we can get a response to benefit granting agencies and employers. And the goal of this is, for both programs, is to make sure that we are automating responses to the greatest extent possible. Anytime we have to have a manual intervention and humans involved, A, takes a lot of resources, B, takes a lot of time for us to call through data sources and piece together information to get correct information to our customers, employers and benefit granting agencies, and it really just slows down and makes our process far more inefficient. So the ultimate goal is to automate, integrate and automate as much as we possibly can, and then reserve our human creativity for the really complex technical work that can't be solved through automation. SAVE is the same thing. We have seen a significant number of queries coming into our SAVE queue. A lot of those, again, because of data issues, are requiring human intervention. I have unrealistic goals. I'll just put that out there right now. And my goal is to make sure that 100% of SAVE queries, we're able to send an automated response back. Again, when those go to manual verification, it takes a lot, my team's resources, it takes time to get responses back to our customers. And, again, the importance of this in the decision-making process is such that our customers should expect that from us. They should expect to get a real-time quality answer. So looking again at, again, doing what we did with E-Verify, kind of looking under the hood at SAVE and reimagining. We have a step 1 that is automated. We have a step 2 that's manual. Step 3 means you have to send us a document, an immigration document for us to inspect. How do we look at this? And this is where we want partners to come in and think through, what should we be doing, right? I mean, the goal of this is for industry to help teach us something we don't know, to help look through and work with us and look at things from different perspectives. There might be things that we're missing. There may be ideas that you might have about how can we reimagine this and what should we do more strategically to get to those ultimate business outcomes. So this is my last slide, and then I'm going to turn it over to Pablo because he's going to talk about some of the technical requirements. But again, the importance of me just talking a little bit about the programs, and this may be a little bit different for industry days that you've participated in, but I've got an expectation of the industry partner that's going to cover this portfolio knows not quite as much as Amy and I do about SAVE and E-Verify, but darn close, right? The more you know about these programs and how they operate, the better you understand what those business outcomes are, the better you're going to be able to support me. And that's what I'm looking for in an industry partner. I want you to know as much about the business as you do the technical aspects of this. I am looking for somebody who will engage and collaborate at all levels, not just with IT, but with the business. I am certain my name is out there. I meet with CEOs and presidents and PMs all the time. Again, I want to make sure that, what we are requiring of you, we're getting the value from industry that we're deserving of, and making sure that you understand what our priorities are and making sure that we meet regularly to ensure that we're accomplishing and achieving those goals and objectives timely. Agile planning and testing, both of these programs, we have to get it right 100% of the time. We can't deploy code that is going to send incorrect responses to employers or incorrect responses to benefit granting agencies. So the room for error on this is null. It's non-existent. So high expectations for, delivering, testing, developing, delivering, and testing and retesting and testing to get it right. And again, I mentioned the word, I think the most important word we can say here is delivering, right? And delivering the capabilities and the functionalities that really do drive that continuous improvement. And it is about excellence. And again, understanding how fast-paced this environment is. I don't think there's a meeting that I'm in where we talk about, the roadmap and we talk about PI planning and I see dates and I say, well, why March? Can we do it in January? It's always how do we move it to the left, right? Again, it's just because there's an expectation. I understand the importance of these services that we deliver to the public, And therefore, it's my job to drive and make sure that we do get it right, but we are delivering, as quickly as we possibly can. And to deliver as quickly as we can and to make sure that we get it right, this is the expectation that we have for you, which is hiring the right people to do the job. We need the right skills, we need the right people, we need the right attitudes, and we need a real partner in this. So there's going to be through, and I think Stuart's going to talk, or Run's going to talk a little bit about the acquisition strategy, but this is not going to be a paper exercise. There will be challenges. This is about demonstrating your value that you're going to bring to the table. This is not a procurement paper exercise. So I want you all to understand, when you come to these challenges, they are going to be challenging, they're going to be difficult, and we're going to make sure that we find the partner who is going to support these programs to the best of our ability. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pablo, and I will happily take questions at the end of this, but over to you, Pablo.
Thank you, Tammy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Pablo Juarez. I am the branch chief for the verification branch in OIT. I started with this agency back in 2017. And my badge picture, thankfully I don't have it up there because that was my first day at the agency, and the amount of gray hair I had since then, enormous, right? It's an escape defect. Every gray hair is an escape defect, right? So oversee a branch of a great crew of former software developers, former software managers, and they're part of this procurement as well, and part of the team of actually delivering this. So a great bunch of folks, and I'm really proud of all the things that they've done. And we'll go a little bit in terms of what our expectations are for this procurement. So at a very high level, VIS are basically 2 case management systems, right? That's bare bones, that's what it is, right? And it, as Tammy mentioned earlier, it informs decision makers at benefit granting agencies, and it also makes decisions whether someone's, can be employed in the United States. And it's a good reminder that I like to give folks about these systems that, every case, there's a human behind it, right? There's someone looking for a job. It's a dream. It's, someone who's looking for food assistance, a roof over their table. So that is really important to take into why we're looking for a good partner to be able to, deliver this, right? Because operational excellence is key here. It's being able to have that delivery. It's imperative that we're able to do that. So VIS is essentially a conglomerate of different subsystems as well. So you have the overarching E-Verify and SAVE programs. We also have the supporting subsystems that do the data ingestion, that does the case management decision making that the verifiers do. Those are all part of this VIS ecosystem. We have about, and just to give you a scale of this ecosystem, we have about 300 instances in containers. We have about hundreds of repositories, and we have about 200 microservices. So it's not your small web application, right? It's just pretty complex. And to manage that, we actually broke up this work into like 10 different work streams. And with some of these work streams, we have multiple teams within these work streams, right? So we have a couple teams in Verify, a couple teams in SAVE, et cetera. And so what is, as Tammy alluded to earlier, there's a lot of interdependencies. So we need to make sure the partner knows what the left hand is doing versus the right hand, because it will impact the schedule, impact the delivery schedule that we have if there's no communication. And communication is going to be key. It's just going to be an overarching theme that I'm going to be talking about today. Can't stress enough about communication between these teams. And so within these work streams, there's microservices that contain the business logic, the actual heart of decision making, and how do we determine who is this person and what their status is, right? And if you can imagine, it's a reflection of immigration law, and immigration law is pretty complex. So you can imagine the complexity of these microservices. So we need to have someone be able to understand, as Tammy mentioned earlier, what is that logic? What is the business behind that? Why is why is this microservice structured a certain way? And so this ingestion is very important, especially during a transition. So if I can just go over the workflow of the systems real quick. So we have the ingestion of a case, right? We have an individual who's looking for a driver's license, or they're looking for the employment authorization. So we ingest that case through 2 different areas, right? We have a microservice and a website and a GUI. And some of these microservice customers are large. Some you may use now, right? They're pretty large systems that have a high expectation and caliber of services to them. And so these microservices ingest the information, and then from there, based on the information we receive, we're going to go to different data source partners, whether both government and even private entities. And this is where the entity resolution comes into play with this program. We determine, is this really the person we're looking for? We combine that information, and then we spit that back out to the public or the benefit granting agency for them to make that decision whether they are eligible for that benefit. So, and then from there, that data goes back into our data warehouse. So again, what I want to highlight here is that there's these cascading impacts to changes. So if we make a change that the UI web services, it'll impact the logic, it'll impact the case management administration system, because new fields would come into play, and then in fact impact the reporting, because now we have to make reporting off these new fields, and then to make decision makers for the business. What is this new data doing? Like, why is it here? So this entire ecosystem is on AWS, and we use FedRAMP services to make this all happen, to make all this magic happen. There are various languages and frameworks to support this. And it's in the PWS, right? So you see in the PWS, you'll see the different work streams and different languages associated to that. But just to give you an idea of a small example of what these languages are, we have anywhere from Java, Ruby, Scala, React.js, Angular, Spring Boot as a framework, and they all leverage EC2, AKS, and then we manage all the containers using Kubernetes, and also we use Docker for the execution of the various containers that we have. And that's just a small subset of the tools and languages that we currently use. There's a full list you'll see in the PWS that basically tells us what the current state of all these tools and program languages are. So in addition to the functional requirements that we have from the business, we also, one of the goals of this contract as well is, as I mentioned, we have all these different languages, frameworks. We want to be able to standardize and normalize that across this ecosystem, right? I think there are some efficiencies that have been gained in order to do this. So when there is a new change in policy or is a change in priorities, I can be able to, I want to have the ability to move certain team members into that hotspot. How can we deliver that quickly if I don't have enough resources, and not have that huge ramp up because we're running two different stacks and two different frameworks within this work stream. So ultimately, we want to get to that point where we'll be able to streamline it across the entire ecosystem within Biz. I want to take advantage now to answer some questions that came in ahead of this presentation today. So yes, the offer will be taking on this infrastructure, right? We're not going to do a whole new greenfield infrastructure and bring it up from scratch. You're going to take that on as part of this operations. All the APIs are described in the PWS are in operation. It's something we expect the vendor to take over and then take it as their own. They're going to be supporting that from the execution on forward. And there's also the expectation of the vendor to manage this 24/7. This is the operations aspect of this, right? This program is almost 24/7. We have customers in the East Coast to Hawaii to Alaska and even New Guinea, right? I think we have some folks in New Guinea as well. So we need to make sure that we're up and operational at all times, and then have that fast response time if there is an issue. We do automate a lot of our alerts, so the expectation is somebody's be able to receive that alert and then be able to quickly triage that. So it's very important for us to have a partner that has the capability of doing that. So we talked about technology. Now I'm going to talk about the DevSecOps environment. What are expectations of a DevSecOps teams? And so there should be nothing any really spectacular about this, but this is something that we as a government are expecting in this contract. So we look for an organization that has a proper culture of a DevSecOps team, right? We want them to foster innovation. As Tammy mentioned earlier, we're looking to see what else is out there, right? We want to lean forward, right? Is there a better way to do this from a technical standpoint? Is there a better way to do this? Are we doing it the right way? Is there, help us understand what the landscape is, and then we'll see if it makes sense to implement that. We want this organization to develop, foster, and inspire and retain talent. Right, so all this technology is useless unless we don't have that right culture and the right people to be able to understand that and be able to execute this. And I'm going to take a catchphrase from my verification business saying, but we want the organization to combine the people, process, and technology. Right, that's important because all this is useless if we don't have that organization, that culture to be able to execute on this. And then another DevSecOps team characteristic we're looking for is to iterate quickly, add value quickly, deliver quickly, right? And that requires a lot of automation to do that. And so in order to have the automation, you need to have the right people to understand that automation and be able to execute that automation. So the great thing about this program, and one of the things I love about this program too, is that the business understands this, right? And I would argue not a lot of businesses understand fast iteration, adding value quickly. And so much so that I believe, they're adopting some of these agile characteristics within their own business operations. And so this is a great opportunity where we mesh really well and to be able to deliver on this. We expect the vendor to be able to mesh into this as well. It's like a fabric between all three entities, right? Very important to do that. And so there are competing priorities, unfortunately, right? With business, what business wants and what OIT wants, right? Where I come into place, right? There's security issues. Let's give that an example, right? If security policy comes in, we need to understand what the impacts are going to be with the schedule. We need to understand what the impacts would be to the different programs, and then be able to provide the data in terms of what the impact is. We need to have that communication between my team, between Mariah's team, the product owners, and then the business in terms of what would happen to the schedule, because this is necessary. It's that changing priorities that we have to be attuned to and be able to be prepared for. And it does require that strong communication at the organizational level, right? Because if one team understands what the impact is, the other team might not, but we need to have that layer of management to be able to see that across the entire ecosystem and teams. And I mentioned earlier, having that data points, really important to have that data points in terms of if this happens, what would be the impacts of that, and put that into business terms, right? If there's a case issue or the number of cases will go up because we have the security thing we need to put into place, we need to understand that. So this is a fast-paced, highly variable environment, right? The priorities will change and pivot, and it is necessary because there are real-world events, geopolitical events that happen, and policy changes that impact us. That it has happened, and we need to understand again what would be the change of our roadmaps, and then be able to communicate that out. As I mentioned earlier, we have a bunch of interdependencies between these different work streams, and so in order to deliver quickly, we need to have the continuous delivery. So we have pipelines to be able to do this, right? So every time we make a change, we'll be able to put this into pipeline and deliver it, and then product owners will be able to test it, make sure it's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing. And there are because there's so many changes that could happen, we need to be able to decompose that work properly. There's no sense of creating the work that just has this large epic and then we don't know when it's going to be done. That's not how we do things. We need to decompose this work and then be able to deliver that and say, okay, yes, this is what we expected to happen. This is what the impact of the cases are going to be, and then move on from there. And so testing is extremely important. Every change that we make within the ecosystem needs to have a test associated with that. And then and that's going to require automation. And automation through all this is key. To do the volume of changes that we make, the iterations that we do, automation is key. We don't want, for instance, a quality engineer that just knows how to test a website. It's beyond that. It's end-to-end workflow, the end-to-end test of if we do change here, what would be the impact at on the data side of things at the other end, or on the case management system. So how do we do this? One thing is that we want to do this is infrastructure as a code, right? It's this one stop, everything is automated. So we have to scale up. It's not, we just have to manually go in there and make a new server. It's all automated through this infrastructure as a code. And then in order to mitigate as much as we can in terms of the changes and priorities and such, we have, as Sammy mentioned earlier, program increment planning, right? And we do this on a quarterly basis. And so what we want to do is prioritize and sequence the known priorities that we have for this quarter. And we do that, we take about 2 days now to sequence that out and integrate with various other vendors, other teams, even inside, outside of within verification, of what the impact would be, and create that roadmap. And so we try to mitigate as much as we can using that program increment planning. And this is where, leadership at the top is very important, because it is necessary to have buy-in across all of these various teams. Do we have the commitment from the teams to get this done? Is everybody on the same page to get this done? That communication is invaluable, because if one team doesn't have that same commitment, it will impact the other work streams and the other parts of that program. Very important to mitigate that through these program planning. And so we need to have that leadership, we need to have the skill sets of having that enterprise level knowledge and implementation and execution to make this happen. So each team is accountable for the work stream that they're going to be working in. And we give them the flexibility to organize themselves. What is the best way for this vendor to be able to execute and deliver the code that we need and the value that we need for this program? So our expectation is that each work stream, each team has that team agreement. They know what the expectations are when they come in. They know who to talk to. They know what the objectives are. and they don't come in not knowing what they're doing, what they do, right? They come in with the confidence of like, this is what our mission is, this is what we need to do for this sprint or for this quarter, and have that that comfort level, and that requires that leadership from the top, right? Is to be able to have that comfort level. So I'm going to go a little bit about the staffing expectations.
Pablo, can I just add to that real quickly? Sure. In terms of, you know, the PI planning and the epics and the user stories, again, making sure that our industry partners understand every single person working on the team, every single team player across the board understands what that ultimate outcome is. What is the business value that we're trying to deliver? That is so important. It's not just a user story. It's not just an epic. It's not just releasing and testing code. It's actually understanding the magnitude of that work and what you're delivering and what that business value is that we're intending to get. So again, that's where we're always going to tie in, and that's how we decide through these PI planning, you know, exercises. What are we going to do first? There's a lot of work to be done, and how do we rack and stack and prioritize? I rack and stack, and Amy and I rack and stack based on what can we do that's going to have the greatest amount of impact, positive impact on benefit granting agencies and employers. So that's how we do it, and that's the lens that we look through. And I want to make sure that we're communicating that in terms of the technical pieces, also, you know, making sure you understand and your teams understand what that business value is as well that we're intending to achieve.
Thank you. So staffing. So what are the requirements and what are generally we're looking for in this contract? So within we have the management team, right? We talked a little bit about having that overarching layer of knowledge and expertise of enterprise level of executing this. Then we have some development teams, and they're usually comprised of project owners. They have architects. Have a business analyst to do the ingestion of the requirements, et cetera, quality engineers, and then we're looking for full stack engineers. And what I mean by full stack engineers, I'm not talking about just someone who just knows how to develop a website and that's it, but it's someone that can understand the front end, the middleware, and then the back end of it, right? Having that full stack and understanding of that entire application, not just a simple developer. It's a full stack engineer. And then we also have we have some teams that's like a shared model of operations, right? We have some platform engineering teams that, you know, goes in and support the pipelines that we have within this program, and so that these development teams aren't just, you know, busy working on pipelines, that they're actually working on value add work. And so we have a whole team dedicated to be like the firefighter if there's a pipeline issue, et cetera. And then of course we have a security folks that come in and to be able to, you know, help any security issues for the entire all the developer teams that we have within this program. And then of course we have a UI team that would be able to go in there, do some UI help and work and to implement that through each of the work streams. You know, in terms of security, you know, one thing is important for the program or for the vendor to understand that we want to move security as far left as possible, right? So every code that they do has security in mind, that they're developing something that will pass every muster that we have in the pipelines. We do have gated pipelines to ensure that, you know, at the minimum, are they passing the security checks that we require. And it's very important for us to keep that sense of security, because again, these are people that are trusting us with their PII, right? Their passport information, social security numbers. We need to have that trust to the public that we're going to take care of this information. And so that starts with our vendors, right? The folks actually developing this. So very important. It's very important to have that security aspect of this program in mind and moving as far to the left as possible. We're also looking for experienced staff in this that have worked on large, complex enterprise-level projects, right? That they understand the full stack of this of the applications that we run, and we need these folks to also be polished in terms of, you know, interfacing with us and also interfacing with the public. There are instances where they'll be interfacing to the public in terms of like the ICA that we publish out there, and then getting that ingestion and getting that feedback in terms of, well, how does the UI work? How does the ICA work? So, and also there is a level of support that we require from the customers. There's level 3 support that we have. That's important for the customer to be able to know or be part of. Sorry. So in terms of this contract and staffing it, we do have a 4-month transition in EOD in this contract. And just for awareness, how long does an EOD take? And EOD means entry on duty. It takes about 60, 90 days. And then plus we need another week for delivering the actual computer, GFE, or government furnished equipment. Historically, this program has not seen a large incumbent capture. That's something to keep in mind that we want the vendors to plan and account for when you all take on this work. And we need about 158 people by the 4th month to fully execute and get that transitioned. In order to make that happen, we are asking everybody to complete these packages that you submit to us for background checks, et cetera. Your vetting process needs to be robust in order to make this smooth. So the other thing too is because of that vetting process and your background checks, let me step back a little bit. So in order for the vendor to touch these systems in production, you need to have a valid background check. So it's important for you all to also have that vetting process in your end to ensure that as much as you can to ensure that they have a smooth background check implementation, because that will delay your ability to be able to execute and touch production systems. So something to keep in mind as you look into executing this contract. During this transition, we're looking to vendor to have a thorough plan of how this information is going to be ingested, right? It's something that has to be quantifiable, has to be trackable. We want to be able to see where are the spots that we need to have focus on. Where are we not getting the people that you need or the information you need in order to have a smooth transition? And so that is the high expectation we have as we start this program. Is what is that transition plan? How are you going to measure it? How are you going to communicate to us in terms of how that transition is going? And so in the first couple of months, what we're going to be doing is measuring your velocity, and then our expectation is that velocity goes up. Right, you got the system in place, or you had the people in place. You're going to start understanding what that is, and then we're going to start ramping up. Right, how do you deliver that value quickly? And there's a short period of time where we're going to be expecting that increase in velocity. And so, of course, eventually we're going to start. There are performance goals that we have in this contract and metrics we expect you to adhere to that we'll be tracking as soon as we get that ramp up. So in conclusion, this is a fast-paced, highly iterative environment, and it does require tight partnership between us, and we need to work at scale. So I do appreciate the time and y'all coming in this morning.
Hi, I'm Amy Wheelock. I'm the chief of the verification division, and I just want to highlight for you all, I hope what's coming across right now is the business's expectations and the caliber of technology that we're looking for, right? So, I take direction from Tammy, I take her business, I take her prioritization and her business outcome expectations, and then I work with Pablo and others like Mariah and our product owners and their IT PMs and our solution owners on the contract side to deliver this, right? And so Pablo's right. I rejoined USCIS in 2017, and at the time, USCIS had already, made a full turn into an agile environment. And painful as that was, I think 10 years were, already under their belt as they moved. And then I joined, and I was inculcated in every way, shape, and form, believe in it inherently, and so much so that as a business, I'm very much trying to not only partner with Pablo and our IT contractors, but also think ourselves in the business organization as agilely as we can to do smaller increment planning, to really deliver incremental value and to iterate. So I cannot say strongly enough how tied at the hip we are, how, it's all of it, right? From what Tammy said, our expectations of what a partner is going to bring to the table is know our business, understand what we're delivering. And then that delivery is going to take place in partnering with us at the more incremental level, like, Mariah manages the product owners, and then they understand like more, granularly where we want that product to go. But then that product sits in an environment that has to support, ingestion and movement through all the way to delivery of code that's going to, be used by us to manually verify cases or be used by web service providers to interact with us in the most modern way possible. So it really is, business all the way through technology development and deployment, and then what are we getting out of it? I just think it's a high caliber of expectations for business understanding and technical delivery. And I just wanted to share that with you before turning it over to Rhonda.
All right, so let's talk about acquisition strategy. So please note the big subject to change. We are in the beginning stages of putting this together. So what we tell you today may change tomorrow, and I'll apologize up front for that. So the solicitation for this, we will be posting a draft. That will be presented on the next slide, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. So you'll be able to see the entire solicitation, the evaluation factors, as well as the PWS. There is also another piece to this. It is Falcon Small Business, or what I lovingly call Baby Falcon. The program folks like to call it ES. But that we have not decided on a procurement vehicle at this point. We will be posting an RFI soon. We are, again, in the very beginning stages of going down the Baby Falcon or ES road. For Falcon, trade-offs will be utilized. We will not do low price technically acceptable. So we will be doing trade-offs. So please keep that in mind. Historically, as Pablo mentioned, the OIT contracts, we have had a high number of incumbent transfers. So we don't anticipate that here. Lots of service contracts, you will have a high number of employees. They're working for one contractor today, and tomorrow they're working for a new contractor. Please be aware that that may not be the case here. So please work that into your strategy. Again, there will be 2 separate performance work statements, one for ES and one for Falcon. ES will be posted soon as a draft so that you can all get your eyes on that. Let's see. This is just a consideration for Falcon Small Business ES. We are anticipating a recertification. So just keep that in mind, please. Again, subject to change, but these are the timelines that we're looking at. Please realize that this is incredibly aggressive. Please also realize we've got lots of holidays that are in this time frame. So we're going to be working those holidays. We're going to be putting all of this together, and we hope that you'll participate in that. So again, subject to change, but this is what we have mapped out thus far. We'll post the draft. We're hoping to get the actual solicitation posted on November 1st. The proposals will be due very shortly after that. We will have oral presentations in person, probably at this location. We will also have an advisory down select. We hope to have those sent out right after the beginning of the year. We will have a technical / coding challenge. A portion of that will be sent to those that have been advised to go on to phase 2. That will be sent out. You will have approximately 10 business days to perform that piece. And then you will also be coming back to this facility to do the technical challenge in person. And then we hope to get this awarded by the end of March. So again, please note it's very, very aggressive and lots of holidays in the mix. These are the evaluation factors that we anticipate. Corporate experience questionnaire will be posted with the solicitation. The oral presentation will be based off of those questions with some additional questions once you're in the facility. Advisory down select will happen after that. Then we'll have the coding technical challenge. Past performance will be a part of phase 2, and then price. And we're going to post these slides. So just so you know, you don't have to take pictures of all of them. And so we do have these posted on APFS. And for those of you that don't have the numbers, I'll read them out to you quickly. For Falcon, it's F 2023-063625. For Falcon Small Business, it's F 2023-064406. Those records will be continuously updated until award. And Mike Hamlet is our industry point of contact, right over there. So these are our quarterly calls. This does not only include Falcon and ES. These are all of USCIS projected procurements. So if you want to be involved in those, he posts this out on SAM.gov. You're welcome to join. Anything? No? All right. Questions? If you would, please just head over to one of the microphones.
Hi, I'm really loud. I don't need a microphone. Hi, Peter Frith from Annika Systems. For EAS, are you considering following the same structure from an acquisition? For example, a coding and tech challenge, orals through phase one, and all of that, or is that still up in the air?
That's currently still up in the air.
Request from a small business perspective, just from a cost and a challenge perspective from small businesses, having both a coding and a tech challenge unless you're just making a change to the existing code you built on the coding challenge, is a very daunting task for small businesses that don't have the broad depth of the larger business that maybe perhaps only a coding or a tech challenge rather is just something that we faced in the past.
Thank you.
McGee with Akama. Good morning, Mark McGee with Akama. Thanks for your time, everyone. Appreciate the thoroughness of the presentation. I'd like to piggyback on just one point that my colleague raised with regard to the small business aspect, and to the extent that any coding and technical challenges will be used for the small business portion, the sooner you could make that announcement, the better, simply because of the preparation time needed. But my main question is, while I realize things are subject to change, in the totality of what you presented today, at a high level, can you at least comment on what the small business portion of the work may entail?
Again, we're still in the midst of, what work goes into what program or what project. So that's still in the works. I think what we published so far, Falcon, I think is pretty much set. IS is still, we're in the middle of putting it together. So don't have that for you yet.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Well, good morning still, sorry. My question is around the small business portion from an acquisition standpoint. Is the structure going to be where all of the past performance needs to come from small business? I'm with Big Bear Artificial Intelligence. We're a mid-size. We're here to support small businesses. So the past performance structure, is it going to be all the past performance coming from the small, or can mid-size and large-size vendors support smalls and put up at least one past performance?
We do anticipate, as we have in most of our small business acquisitions, allowing a portion of that coming from a major subcontractor.
Okay, thank you.
Hi there, this is Ben Morris with Pluribus Digital. And I had a kind of an acquisition question that relates to what Pablo was highlighting about the importance of the transition and staffing. And I didn't see that as an explicit evaluation factor. And so I was wondering if that would be either part of the oral presentation or, for consideration as being added as a factor.
We can discuss it and talk about adding it as a potential.
Hi, I'm Sanjeev Dougal from Debt Technology Group. So I have a question about, I'm on the technical side of things. So I was reading the PWS and it states Tableau and it states some SAS, some SAS. So how deep is this program into COTS products? How deep are you in Tableau and SAS? So that was.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. So for Tableau, it's not really a core aspect of the product in terms of this program or this Falcon. We want to have people to be able to create dashboards for us, right, internally, not necessarily for the public facing. There's going to be another team that does that, and that's what SAS does. So there's a federal team that takes care of SAS to create those reports for the decision makers. Falcon is not expected to do that, but some knowledge is required because we are ingesting data and putting into the warehouse where SAS feeds off of. So having that basic understanding of what the expectations are for the business to create these reports is what's necessary. But Tableau is nice to have to create these dashboards, at least for my team and also for the business, to see what the current status is of current of the cases, and what the percentages are for IAVs or cases that require manual verification. So that's where that comes into play.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Hello, Chris Schwalm with CVP. Have you determined how you will allocate work to Falcon or Baby Falcon? Is it work stream oriented? Is it per team?
No, it's still not determined yet. But what you see in the Falcon PWS is what we have slated for that contract, and then what we have for IS. It's not determined yet.
Sorry, so there will be
not determined yet.
There will be a similar PWS?
It will be similar PWS, yes.
Okay, just 1 second. We've got a couple of questions online. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Sudha Venkateshwaran, Alpha Omega. Given that you all said that you don't expect low price, technically acceptable solutions, we were wondering if you all could establish a range of price that you all expect so that certain companies don't low bid and get these qualified resources that are very, very important to the contract and for us also, right, to have these qualified technical staff. So we're wondering if that's something you all will consider. You've done that in the past, and that's been effective in getting strong teams that can actually staff and maintain the staff throughout the contract.
Yes, that's definitely something that we will consider about putting into the solicitation.
I'm not tall enough. Can you? Thank you. Hi, my name is Courtney. I'm the CEO and founder of Colano and Associates. I'm also a prior federal contracting officer representative. So I have two questions, one technical and one more contracts related. So from the contracts perspective, are you guys looking to require a facility clearance on both EIS and Falcon? And from a technical perspective, when it comes to zero trust, are you guys incorporating zero trust in this as well? And if so, how?
No, we do not anticipate a facilities clearance.
So zero trust is something that's overarching from the OIT, and so whatever policies come down for that, we must adhere to. And not only from the program perspective in terms of what we're trying to deliver, but also from the actual developers and the systems that they use in terms of interacting with the agency and such. So zero trust, again, comes from the overarching OIT, and then we have to adhere to it. And that's part of the thing I talked about earlier, is if we have something comes in from OIT in general and it's a priority, it's a competing priority, that's where communication, having understanding what the impacts would be to the roadmap and to what we're supposed to deliver, that's where it comes into play. And we expect the vendor to be able to help us, what is the actual impact, and have that data-driven analysis to it. So hopefully that answers your question.
And I would add actually that, that prioritization, right? So when those requirements come in, like zero trust or other kind of security improvements, we have to then grapple as a business, like, well, there's less capacity in the IT pipeline. How are we going to, again, we're going to further refine, but the smaller it gets, the more challenging those prioritization conversations and exercises become. But that's where we're part and parcel of the conversation about how to make it secure, but also how to still get what we want.
Hey, I'm Anthony Stoico from Lightfeather. I had a kind of a specific question. I saw that you were looking for the PCIS integration. I'm going to ask about PCIS integration, but I know there's a lot of interconnected systems and verifications. Do you see any challenges with working with another contractor on something like PCIS who's maintained by another team? Do you see any big hurdles or challenges to get through with that?
Yeah, I think Pablo hit this right. So it's not just with PCIS. There's so much integration across the board with many of the systems that this particular contract would be required to do. So it really is understanding those integration points, understanding those other partners, and making sure that we work together across the board to deliver on PCIS or whatever the initiative is. PCIS is just one element of that. We've got lots of different data sources, and there are a lot of different teams, not only across USCIS doing different work on different initiatives, but even outside of USCIS. So again, it gets to the complexity of what we've been talking about. But that coordination, collaboration, working across teams, not only within your own, primes and subs, but also within our own USCIS structure and outside of our structure. So yeah, it's complicated, but that's where that team integration and communication is so important. But we've seen it done successfully, right? I mean, we're integrating PCIS, across with Ellis. We've integrated PCIS with our first FOIA system, and we've done a lot of PCIS integration already. And we do have different companies and different teams working on the various pieces of those portfolios that have done it successfully and done it well.
Yeah, good to hear. Exciting. Thank you.
Hi, Miguel with Big Berry Eye again. You mentioned that you're open to being led by industry in some regards, and you're looking for that from the vendors that are participating in this. From an artificial intelligence and machine learning standpoint, can you talk to us about what you're doing with AI/ML today? If not, is there a roadmap? Is there something you're considering already? Optimal character recognition for the driver's license and the I-9 forms or something of that sort, just for the sake of not recommending things that are already kind of top of mind for you from a proposal standpoint?
Yeah, no, great question. And, there's some elements of AI that we currently have in place, but there is an overarching, agency-wide, okay, where are we going with AI? Where are we going with as you mentioned, document processing, et cetera, that we will be part of. We will eventually, look into integrating at a certain point. In terms of what are we looking for a vendor to do, of course, we want to get, what is the best practice? What's out there in terms of how to implement this? And we're going to ingest this and then share that within the agency as well. But there are overarching priorities and programs that are working towards that now. But Falcon really, that isn't the focus. But there could be some attributes of that we'd probably look into implementing, but it's just not the focus of the contract.
And right, AI, it's a big buzzword out there in industry. I don't think there's an article where somebody's not talking. I mean, it was Agile at one point, and now it's AI, and it's just the latest and greatest, right? From my perspective, I don't really care what the technology is, right? What I care about is what will help us deliver the most business value. I'm not going to be wowed because it's AI. I'm going to be wowed because it's going to improve data integrity. It's going to improve the service that I'm having to provide to employers and benefit granting agencies, and it's going to reduce manual verification, far more than what we are seeing today. So if that is a solution that helps me achieve that business outcome, I'm going to listen to it all day long. But I'm going to have to see what the value is and the analysis that demonstrates that that's an investment that I should be making.
Okay, thank you.
One thing that I want to mention that was touched upon with the presentation a lot is, as you can see, the business is incredibly invested. So whatever teams come to the table, they will have to be integrated with other teams, because we are trying to get to that automated solution where those responses we're sending out to the public are in right time, they're correct, they're secure. So what we need in our contractors is a collaborative partner that's going to work with the product owner, the ITPMs, the business to get us there. So as Tammy mentioned, whatever technology is there, yes, keep us current, but at the end of the day, correct responses that are secure and timely.
Hi there, Tim Garvey, Technologies. There's a lot of speculation in industry as far as past performance requirements, whether it's dollar amounts, annual dollar amounts, FTE counts. Is government leaning one way or another on that, or is it going to be as broad as similar size and scope? Thank you.
Right now, we're still developing the past performance and corporate experience criteria. You'll see that in the actual draft solicitation.
Can you please talk to any teaming restrictions that you guys may implement for this, especially whether it's a large business get behind a small business on the smaller track or vice versa, especially as it relates to code challenges and things like that?
We don't anticipate any restrictions.
Okay, so a large business could prime and participate in a tech challenge and then also support a small business in their tech challenge.
On the same requirement, or are you talking?
On the two tracks, or where there's a large business, the Falcon and the
Yes.
East as well, right?
Right now, we do not anticipate a restriction on that.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Slavic Hatz. I'm with Sky Solutions. So first quick question, what does EAST stand for?
EAST?
Yeah.
Oh, Pablo.
Hi.
Welcome to my world with Pablo's creativity. I can't even remember that. I like Baby Falcon, Pablo.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
IS is a
Baby Falcon. Baby Falcon's fine.
We got to be careful what we tell industry, right? So IS, it stands for Enhanced Yield Assistance and Support.
We still don't even know what that means, so someone would probably ask, what does that mean, Pablo?
Yield and support.
Huh?
Baby Falcon.
Yeah. Essentially a Baby Falcon, yeah.
So my question is primarily around Baby Falcon. We're a small business. So I think Tammy, Pablo, you mentioned the importance of understanding the business. Obviously, very critical. At the same time, the importance of bringing innovation and really understanding the technology. What would you recommend to a small business like ours who has the technology experience? We have implemented case management systems in 5 different departments, but don't have the CIS experience. How do we pursue this opportunity?
Are you, when you say the CS experience, you're talking about the business knowledge?
Correct.
So,
That's what I mean.
Yeah, so we do, I do a contract kickoff meeting for every contract that's awarded within my directorate. And we talk about the importance of understanding the business. I get it, right? You're not going to be able to come in day one and have a deep level of knowledge and understanding of the business. But what my expectation is, you learn it, right? So you engage with the product owner, you engage with the business side of the house, and you learn it as quickly as you can. It's not an expectation you come in with it. There's a lot of information that's out there publicly. I'd strongly encourage you to, educate yourselves as much as possible. But we're willing to teach you that. We just need industry partners to be willing to learn it. Because again, it only helps you do your job to the best of your ability if you do understand the business side of the house, in addition to the technical requirements. But yeah, there's not an expectation day one that you come in as a Save and E-Verify expert.
Right. And to foot stomp that, I'm the business, right? So, I mean, we hire new people that that we're bringing them in that have no experience, and I expect them to learn our business. It doesn't matter. It's a little bit of the cleaner at the NASA headquarters that knows that they were pursuing a moon landing. So it's that kind of thing. We all should know it. So we expand our partnership to include, new vendors and make sure that they have an opportunity to learn as well. It's the commitment to the learning. It's the making the resources available. And that's really what we're looking for, demonstrated commitment to learning the business. And we'll share everything we can and will with you.
I really appreciate that.
And if I can add to that, so no business understands the nuances of immigration law, right? Nobody comes in there knowing what that is, essentially, right? And it'd be good to have somebody like that. But part of this is the transition is understanding that, because you can't decompose the work, you can't understand the logic if you don't understand the business part of it. Why is the logic written this way in the code that you could be intaking, right? And so, and also as part of the transition to ramp up to this, the expectation is that the organization will put this as a priority to understand that business. And we work with Mariah that, in the past has been able to provide the product owners to give that overview and understanding what is it that we do here, why is it important, and what is the actual logic behind that. So there's, again, as Amy mentioned and Tammy mentioned, there's that integration within on this side to ensure that happens. So you do have that quick ramp up and execute and deliver quickly, right? That's really important to do that. But like I said, nobody comes in understanding that from default. We expect people that are open to it, that are smart, and be able to translate that into technology.
I really appreciate that. One more question, if I may. So on sort of carrying that same topic. So you mentioned there was 150, I think, people supporting the program right now. Can you talk about the folks on the government side, so Mariah, the product owners, what does that team look like? How many people, things like that? Thank you.
Yes, sure. You won't find a more dedicated business partner than what you would find in Iris. A lot of contract teams collaborate and they try to get here after working with us because those product owners, they're professionals that understand we have public facing systems that cannot go down. And because of that, they're highly invested in the immigration policy. They'll help the incumbents know when a new class of admission comes out, how do we map that in the system? They're the people to go to. Pablo's ITPMs, there's many of them in this room, they're wonderful as well, where we are there for you. We fail when you fail. We succeed when you succeed. And so it's not a hands-off approach where you'll see us here, you'll see us at the kickoff. It's not that way. They're in your sprint plannings, your reviews, they're at the backlog refinements, they're there to answer those questions. And if they can't answer those questions or you're not getting feedback from them, then you can come to me to get those answers, and I bring it up higher because immigration is very complex with what we have to do. So they're embedded in the team. The ITPMs are embedded in the team, and so you get that collaboration to the extent that you want and need it to be successful.
And what I'd like to add is we are the business, right? So we have policy and product program management. We have where Mariah is business and technology integration, and then we have an operations associate chief. So in that business and technology integration, yes, that's where Mariah sits, and we have product owners, government employees who know inside and out the business and know the product, the business lines, E-Verify and Save and all of their sub-products. And they also understand, the vision of where we're trying to get to. I think it's important for you all to understand like that whole aspect of the other side of Mariah, her counterpart, is also in program and product support. So we are, it is a big public facing programs. We are hyper aware of deploying code that creates, conflict and issues and a lot of phone calls to our customer support. I don't like that. And so I've got a whole group of people that are dedicated to user acceptance testing. And they are actually people who are on the line doing manual verifications and accessing these systems and getting to know what the nuances of the immigration data, codes, all the things that we use to instantiate the decision through technology, right? And, so user acceptance testing, I've got operational readiness testing, and we do first step audits where we take people and we target it to new deployments, and I make sure that the quality of the responses is in every way, shape, and form as highly accurate as it possibly can be. And then we do, periodic audits, statistically significant audits. So that's the business side, that's the government side doing that, and so that's our footprint. That's how in Pablo's business we are, and it's real, and that's what I manage on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, actually, I want to footstop that too, because something I failed to mention in my presentation is that the testing and such is extremely important, because if you modify the logic and if you don't understand what that logic does, you're not interacting with the business owners, the product owners, and what that change really means. What could happen is you could have a U.S. citizen looking for a job, and then they get a notification that they can't work in the United States. I mean, could you imagine that happening because we made a change in the logic? So it's important to have that interface with all of us and understand what those changes are and have that open communication across the board. So just want to stop that a little bit.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Fadden, and I'm from Lightfeather. My question is actually for contracting. And first, I just want to say thank you. I think on behalf of all of industry for putting this together. You guys, this is awesome. But my question is, I know it's great that you're doing a small business track and a large, but on the large business side, do you plan to include a small business subcontracting plan with, things like women-owned small business, SDV, OSBs, 8A?
No, we don't anticipate a subcontracting plan. Would it be done through at your mass schedules level?
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Arfa Sayed. I'm with Ad Hoc, and I have a couple of questions I'm trying to make sure they make sense as I marry sort of the draft to what we heard today. So I'll start with some of the KP requirements and this program leadership team. Is the expectation that the team for orals is going to be sort of KP that were identified in that? Is it going to be closed off to that, or what does USCIS anticipate in terms of keeping that orals team closed off?
I'm so sorry, I missed the question.
Okay, it's my fault. So the question is regarding the orals component, right, and Tech Challenge. Are there going to be parameters around who can attend? I heard that it was going to be in person. Are you keeping it closed off to KP only, or sort of what is the dynamic that you expect there?
Right, yeah, so I think initially we're looking at key personnel to be part of this, and there's going to, it's going to be, as you mentioned, it's going to be in person, and so they need to know the overall performance of what they submitted in the questionnaire. Right, and so people who are employees of whoever submitted the questionnaire should be part of the oral presentation.
Okay. I also saw that uniquely it was mentioned, reference that experts are considered people that have like speaking engagement experience or have done white papers. Can I pull the thread on sort of what the thought process behind having language about that included came from?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we don't want people to just say that they're experts, right? It's, do they have that track in past history of being experts? Are they considered by their peers as being knowledgeable in terms of the skill sets they claim to have? And so that's the basis behind having that clause in the PWS.
Okay. Thank you. And regarding incident response, there was 3 tiers of support reference. Are you able to share who the tier 2 contractor is and what expectations for the tier 3 support of this vendor would be?
So
in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, so tier 2 would not be applicable to this contract. So tier 2 is going to be IS. That's where we expect that, you know, be the interface of the technical aspect of calls coming in from the public. And the tier 1, if for folks who read the PWS, is really the federal aspect. The federal government's ingesting those calls, and then any technical calls come over to tier 2 and then tier 3.
Okay, I appreciate it. And I just want to second what Sudha said about price and having a range so that we can focus on the best solution for USCIS. And just thank you for your time and insights today. Appreciate it.
Bryce Koala from SoftRams, echoing the appreciation for putting this together. First is just a recommendation from the contracting standpoint. If you can level set total number of team members that participate in the coding challenge, you will get an apples to apples comparison of what's being submitted. And then question is for Falcon, are there DORA metrics available for the program level?
I'm sorry, are there what metrics?
DORA metrics. DORA, DORA.
Oh, DORA metrics? That is, yeah, I mean, if you look into the PWS, you'll see it in terms of the performance criteria or the metrics, you'll see there are aspects of that in there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Online questions. Yeah, we have a few online questions about past performances. The first question is, what type of past performances are you looking for?
That will be spelled out in the solicitation draft. As I said, we're still kind of developing that.
The question I have is regarding Falcon and Baby Falcon in terms of scope and in terms of the number of FTEs that you mentioned. You had mentioned a number of 158. Is there kind of a delineation between how much are Falcon and Baby Falcon?
So the number I provided, one, you know, again, it's not final, right? So 158 thereabouts to give you like a target, what were your expectations? That's specific to Falcon, right? And so that's like basically the base requirements to be successful. There, you know, there could be room to grow on top of that, the options and such, just depending on, you know, we want to have the flexibility within this contract to grow in case we have new requirements to come in. So, but at the baseline, that's what we have currently.
Okay, and then to contracting, just to confirm, as a subcontractor, you will have the ability to support both the large business and small business? Yep. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
The question reads, Pablo mentioned needing 150 consultant will be needed within 4 months of award. Is it 150 for both Falcon and Falcon EYAS or just Falcon unrestricted?
Answered that, so it'll be just Falcon.
Just Falcon, yeah.
Thank you. Stephen Krill with Inadev. Really appreciate the conversation so far.
thinking about the timeline that you shared this morning, what factors are you considering in the selection of the small business contract vehicle? Thank you.
That we're still developing. Everything that you saw today as far as the evaluation criteria was for Falcon. Falcon Small Business or Baby Falcon, we still have to do the RFI. We're not sure which contract vehicle we're using. So as we do that, we'll continue to develop that, and we'll provide updates either through APFS or through the Industry Day slides.
A quick follow-up then. Do you envision any of these factors to change between Falcon and EOS as you look at which vehicle you're going to choose for the small business set-aside?
Possibly.
Online question. The draft PWS indicates there are 7 full-time employee positions, key full-time employee positions. Do all 7 FTE positions need to be employees of the prime contractor?
Yes.
Yes.
What type of certification will be expected from industry in order to prime CMMI, ISO, et cetera?
I don't think we have any certification requirements in the PWS.
Next question reads, will Falcon be a multi or single award vehicle on contract?
Single.
Given there will be, I'll start over, given there will likely be little incumbent capture, does USCIS have a process to expedite the clearance process? If so, what is the target timeframe?
So I'll take that one. And again, this gets back to, the companies doing their responsibility. I am always going to personnel security and phoning a friend and saying thanks in advance. We do our best to prioritize clearances. As you can appreciate and imagine, we are competing with a lot of federal clearance actions that are in the pipeline, as well as a lot of other contractor actions in the pipeline. But I do my best within my own director to prioritize those and reach out to personnel security and have them cleared. However, what I often find out is when I do go and say, please help me, thank you, and beg for them to clear mine first, is that then I get emails back saying, so-and-so hasn't submitted a package yet, so-and-so doesn't have fingerprint cards that are part of the package, so-and-so hasn't gone through the EQIP, which I think we changed the name of that now, I don't even know what it is. Pablo, I don't even know what EQIP stands for. Pablo's probably going to name that, mini Falcon or something, whatever.
Baby EQIP.
Baby EQIP. So again, I can't stress the importance of, I'm happy to do my part on getting personnel security to prioritize those, again, understanding there are capacity limitations, but really those packages and the actions that employees need to take needs to be managed by you, not us. By the time it gets to personnel security, it needs to be comprehensive, it needs to be accurate, and contractors need to be doing what they're told to do by the dates they're told to do it, and that's on you to manage. So we'll do our part as long as those packages are comprehensive and submitted as quickly as possible.
And I'd like to also add that we are dependent on you guys to understand, what people are needed to be prioritized, right? What is it necessary for you to do the transition and to be able to onboard quickly and be able to ingest this information as quickly as possible, right? So it's not just give us a bunch of names and then prioritize it. It's who's important to the vendor to make this happen, right? So we depend on you all to prioritize that list, because we're going to take it up and we're going to prioritize the best we can, but it's ineffective. It's not the right people to be prioritized.
Yeah, and to foot stomp that, like if you bring a junior developer in and expect them to help you all transition in, that's not a good sequencing, right? You really want to, like, who are your strategic thinkers that are going to be setting up your infrastructure and start pulling in things. And Terry was going to mention a PMR, monthly PMRs, especially early on, we might do more frequently than that, but that's when, Pablo, you were talking about, like, we're tracking, right? We know what skill sets we need, roughly speaking, and you're going to be proposing something. So if you say you need 10, X's, and then, you're like 1, and month 2, you're still 1, and month 3, you're still 1. That's an area of concern, and Pablo's going to be leaning hard on it, kind of going like that. Those are some of the first skill sets we need to make sure the transition with the existing knowledge happens right and well, right?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Sheila Evans with Light Feather. I have a question about the FTE count. So it's 158. Are you anticipating a certain percentage of those to be cleared in order to get NTP, or is it a transition team that has to be fully staffed with granted EODs?
You'll need once you establish your transition team, you'll be able to start transition, and then from there we'll probably look to have a set number of teams for the authorization to proceed for the full authorization.
Thanks. I have one more question for contracting. Are you open to CTAs?
At the if it's already established within GSA, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Peter again. Follow up to the question that was just asked about all key personnel having to come from the prime. Can I make a request for Baby Falcon, if you include 7 key personnel, that subcontractors be allowed to support the small business prime and provide key personnel as well? Not so much a question, more so a request. Sorry.
No, understood. Usually for the small business ones, we don't expect or anticipate that number of key personnel and them all coming from the prime.
Chris from CVP. It sounds like the acquisition strategy is further along for Falcon than it is for IS. Is it fair to say that those two will be staggered by a few months? Is there an estimate around that?
Yeah, we anticipate them being staggered because of where we are in the process for Falcon versus Falcon Small Business. We anticipate there being a few months gap between the two.
Subject to change.
We would like for them to be executed at the same time. We would like them to start at the same time. But because of how massive Falcon is, we have to fit Baby Falcon into the pockets of lull that we have, because there's only so many of us to do it. So it's going to be a complicated dance, but that's the hope.
Hi, Robert Gordon with Lightfeather. My question is about NextGen. Is there a due date or a timeline that you're looking to transition from Eve to NextGen?
Yesterday. So again, as we've been talking all along, this is, as a matter of fact, we have a session this afternoon, 2.5-hour session to talk about Viz Pieces integration. But we are very much looking at how do we do this in an iterative way as well. As I mentioned before, we've got Pieces integrated across lots of case management systems within USCIS. As a matter of fact, it's a service that we've exposed through an API to CBP to help with the surge at the border. They are now using Pieces. So we are looking to integrate Pieces across the board, not just with Viz, but we're doing it across other parts of USCIS and outside of USCIS as well. So we're looking right now at, again, we want to make sure that we have an underlying service right now called PCS that we're using. The intent of Pieces is it's rich in data. There's more data. So we're looking at transitioning from PCS to PCS, and that work is underway already today. And will begin even before this contract is awarded. However, there is still going to be iterative work going forward, whereas Pieces continues to add data, update data, that we make sure that Viz is a consumer of that data. So a lot of testing and so on and so forth. And Mariah might be able to add a little bit more to what I said. But again, the sooner the better, because again, it gets to the whole intent of Pieces is leveraging all of that identity information that is linked to an individual that will hopefully reduce manual verification. That's the intent of Pieces, is that integration will help us reduce manual verification at a much greater level than what we're seeing today.
And then to add to that, to your NextGen question, that is a pilot program that was sanctioned by Congress. It is a pilot, so we do have a hard deadline to get that done, to have that MVP out there with a small subset of employers before they give us the bless off to take it go further. That's something that's near and dear to everybody's up here's heart, and so we don't want to throw that in the trash can. So yes, there is a hard spring deadline for MVP to go live for Congress to see that the money they put forward was used well.
And I want to add, you used a word transition. So I think it's easy to think of NextGen as, you know, overtaking E-Verify. The reality is E-Verify is, like Pablo says, an ecosystem of, you know, a lot of different tools on a platform. NextGen happens to be one kind of offering within the E-Verify environment that enables employees and employers to do a different kind of I-9 dance and employment verification dance. So it's not that NextGen will take over. It could become the transaction preference of employees, employers, ourselves, Congress, everybody, but it's an offering within the family of how we get I-9 transaction data to perform employment verification, you know, on behalf of employers and employees. So it's complementary too, right?
It is, and this is something we've done a lot of external engagement on with employers. And this is something that they've been asking is, you know, automate the I-9, you know, create that, you know, end-to-end integration between, you know, what the employee does, the employer does, the I-9 process with E-Verify, and get that work credential. And we've got lots of ideas even going forward about, you know, do we need an employer to run an E-Verify query on every US-born citizen every time a person moves from one E-Verify participating employer to another after that person's already been verified and has a work credential that is essentially a work credential for life, right? Versus somebody who has temporary work authorization. So there's a lot of other benefits that we're going to be looking at post-MVP where we continue to deliver those efficiencies to employers. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is I can't imagine, and again, I might be a bit unrealistic, I can't imagine employers not using the NextGen service once they get an understanding of what it is and they see how we're really, the goal of this is how do we reduce employer burden, how do we reduce employee burden, and how do we get that work credential to that individual with an expiration date as quickly as possible, if there needs to be an expiration date. So the E-Verify backend where we're running and checking, you know, the different data sources is always going to be part of that solution. But, you know, I'm hoping that we will see all employers join in using NextGen once we get it out there, we prove it out, you know, with a smaller cadre of, you know, and we want to look across industry. We want small employers, large employers, medium-sized employers. We want employers across different sectors. You know, how does this work for, you know, restaurant, hotel, agriculture, like the scope, right? This isn't just about Amazon and Google. This is, you know, a solution that we're talking with all size employers in different industry types to make sure that as we're developing it, we're getting it right and it's something that's going to work for them. So we've done a lot of that upfront work and engagement to hopefully develop and deliver a solution that will ultimately be the new E-Verify going forward.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Hi, Miguel with Big Berry Eye. My last question. Has there been any thought given to the bifurcation of O&M and DME and how that's going to trickle down into Falcon and Baby Falcon?
No, because we're looking for DevSecOps teams, right? So the operations part of it is incorporated into the teams we're looking at. So we want the teams to have ownership of the code, right? Whatever they deliver, whatever they provide into production, et cetera, they own it, they have to support it, right? So no, we're not going to bifurcate that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I'll go on my tippy toes. Lindsay O, Dev Technology Group. Stuart, can you elaborate? You said already established CTAs at the GSA level. Can you just go into more detail on what you meant by that?
If you look at GSA, basically, if it's already there and it's already established, that's what we're looking for. If you look at what the definition is on their website, that's what we will be using. Online.
Okay, yeah, we have more online questions. Do you anticipate limiting the advisory down select by number or based on scoring qualifications?
We usually in the past have always provided the number. But again, that is all subject to change based on how the scoring plays out. So in the past, you have seen where we've done it as an advisory down select up to, up to 3. But if we have more than 3 that are fully qualified, we will bring more forward if need be.
On the slide, you mentioned that Prime on the Falcon cannot participate in Falcon Small Business, but you later said that there's no limitation. Which one is true? Can large join Falcon Small Business teaming?
For clarification, what we're anticipating, if you are the Prime on Falcon, you cannot be the Prime on Falcon Small Business, Baby Falcon ES, etc.
Next question is, what are your expectations around human-centered design?
I would love to take that. So USCIS as a whole is moving towards human-centered design. So NextGen, what we spoke about, that is a great example of that, where we listened to our user base, we heard what they said, the employees said, I want to enter my own information because if somebody else is typing my information, they get it wrong. Then as Pablo said, it says I'm not qualified to work because bad data in, bad response out. And so collectively, USCIS has done a huge push to focus on human-centered design. So on the business side, that's what Amy was speaking towards, where we have user acceptance testing, but on the contractor side, that's where you come in, where you help when we have to go to those different personas of use cases that translate into what we think our business needs are going to be. That's where you help with that conversation to make sure that we are actually getting the requirements by and large of what's needed to focus on that experience that the users have with any products that we're putting out.
It's constantly, and I always refer to it as engaging with the people who bang on the keys, right? So whatever the solution is that we need to develop and push out, we want to make sure that we don't have a disjointed group of individuals developing the requirements who don't even use the service or the system, right? So it's, again, integrating with all of those, with the entire user community between employers and employees and the government, because it's kind of a trifecta, right? We're all involved, if we're just talking about E-Verify, in using that service. So we need to make sure that everything that we're developing is looked through the lens of the user base. And how we get to that is we engage with them before we actually say these are our requirements. So the user community actually helps develop those requirements. So not only test the requirements, but helps us with the development of those requirements so we get it right.
Also, in the technical aspect of this, the program is in a space that's a fantastic space where we're able to provide Mariah and the business, the NextGen, be able to have that user-centered design by having standardized our universal design within our ecosystem. That's something that we've been able to do and we want to continue doing. It's derived from USWS. I always screw that up.
USWDS.
Thank you. There you go. Thank you, everybody. So it is a derived version of that, right? It's the verification focus that's across the ecosystem. So that is what we want to continue. We expect the vendor to continue that so we can bring products such as NextGen quickly and be able to have that user or human-centered design.
Hi, my name is Janice Swink. I'm with Octo, an IBM company. My question is from a technical perspective. Pablo, you mentioned that you wanted the team members to be able to be flexible to respond to new emerging requirements, and you wanted them to be able to be cross-trained in different technologies. Looking at the appendix of technologies, it's 2 pages long, there's a lot. So from your perspective, what does that technology stack look like for what those team members are really able to demonstrate mastery in?
Right. So that's the outcome of what we want, right? So right now we do have that various technology stacks in different work streams. And one of the outcomes we want from this contract is to standardize that. So then right now don't have the capability of moving one person from work stream to the other without having to revamp their knowledge or understanding of the technology stack. So it's probably like a 1 or 2 month ramp up before they can really start doing the work. And we want to get away from that as much as possible, right? So we want to be able to standardize that across the ecosystem. We want to start standardizing, as I mentioned beforehand, this essentially are 2 case management systems. There should be some commonality between ingestion of cases and such, and we want to, strangle that out. What does that look like? Can we mesh that together so that there's one place where we can have that efficiency? So when I talk about efficiencies, that's what we're kind of looking for. And so we would have the ability to do that. So if there's a new priority comes into play, I can quickly move teams to tackle that and not have to relearn the entire technology stack. So right now it's hard to do that, but we want to get to that point where we can do that.
So does that mean sunsetting some parts of the architecture and what would those be?
Potentially, there might be some refactoring in place and then have to sunset some aspect of the ecosystem.
Thank you.
We have a few more online.
Yep. How many awardees will be made for each category, Falcon and ES? How many awards? Awardees, yeah.
How many awardees?
Awardees.
Yeah.
One for each. One for Falcon, one for Baby Falcon.
Okay. And another question, not sure if it's been answered clearly, but how many anticipated FTEs for ES? And we had heard ES might be O&M, help desk type of support. Can you say if this is not the case? And if you don't know, can you tell us hypothetically what the scope is?
Yeah, so it's still to be determined on the scope, but generally there will be a help desk component to it. There will be some development to it as well. So yeah, I mean, it's going to have both, not at the scale that we're looking for in Falcon, but at a smaller scale. And there is some, and to open up a can of worms a little bit, there is going to be some integration required between the two, right? There, as I talked about earlier, there's work streams that need to talk to each other and be dependent. And so that has to go across both Falcon and IS as well. So there is a development portion of it, there is a help desk portion of it, and there and operations. So.
Are you willing to consider concepts such as blockchains? Is there an SBIR pathway for companies to build proof of concepts?
I welcome any discussions about that. That's going to be interesting in this world, in what we're doing with records management and not records management. Sorry, in terms of ingesting records, I think it's a wonderful area to talk about. Right now, at this time, this contract, there's no plans for that, but welcome any discussions about it for future use cases.
Again, it gets back to what business value would a solution like that drive, right?
Hi, Armand DeKaiser, Agile Trailblazers. Do you plan on publishing the attendee list?
No,
It
we
helps
weren't.
inform teaming and things like that, networking.
We hadn't intended, but that's something we could definitely look at doing.
Thank you.
Look like one final question came in. OMB issued a guideline for digital experience, Integrated Digital Experience Act, to be included in every web application development. Are you considering this in your scope?
It's a good question. I have to take that back. I'll look into that.
We have already been subject to some data calls associated with that, and that's a big chunk to bite off, and so they're OMB I think is looking at slices, right? So we absolutely are looking at how we can be as responsive as possible. At some level, this experience that our employers, our benefit granting agencies go through is not necessarily tied to or sequenced with other government experiences. So, right, like the digital experience is supposed to be kind of like, beginning to end and integrated across, and where a lot of the use of a benefit like way late in the game, right, over and over and over, and its use in society. So we could be subject to some of that. We certainly want to make ourselves as flexible as possible and responsive as possible to a digital set of expectations from the administration. But I think it's going to be incremental in its implementation.
And Amy and I stress the importance of this every day in the leadership meetings that we're in. When these policy decisions are being made, if we decide we want to extend EADs from 2 years to something else, when we want to extend, temporary protected status, or a country is redesignated. So all the things that you're reading in the news that will add data to repositories that we need to use to, again, support employers and support public benefit granting agencies. We're constantly saying, hey, don't forget about the downstream impacts. It does us no good to get somebody in EAD who can't use the darn thing, right? So if I'm given an EAD within an X period of time, to make sure that people who are prone into the United States who can apply for and be considered for work authorization, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that that EAD, when they go to a DMV to get a driver's license, that they're not told, well, this data doesn't match what we have in our systems. I'm sorry. I mean, I don't know that anybody enjoys a DMV experience ever, but then to be told you got to wait 45 minutes or 6 days or 30 days or however long it takes us to then try and do a manual verification to understand why that EAD that we issued isn't matching data in our systems is problematic, right? So again, it really speaks to all of the data partners, all of the integration and the accuracy and currency of that data to make sure that we receive it downstream as part of VIS to be able to respond to E-Verify and save queries. And then the same thing on the public benefit granting side. We want to make sure that those EADs or employers understand what policy changes we're making so they know what types of documents that they can accept. That's part of, the Form I-9 regulation. So we're constantly, it is a continuum. I mean, everything that CBP does, everything that ICE does, every public benefit, every immigration benefits adjudicated by USCIS, all of that data has to be considered for E-Verify and Save. And oftentimes people think about the transaction of issuing an EAD, and I'm trying to educate people, we got to think about how that EAD is used. What does someone do once they have an EAD? Because if that breaks anywhere in the ecosystem, again, that's where we're just creating, problems for applicants, for employees, and so on and so forth. So it's a very important piece of this, and one that we're constantly educating all of our partners to understand a bit better. It's not just a transaction, but you have to understand the whole life cycle. All right, I think we're at time, huh, Stuart?
Yep. One last thing, I just wanted to make everybody aware, if there is a conflict between an answer provided today and the final request for proposal and any of its attachments, the final RFP takes precedence. So.
All right, we really appreciate the interest. It's been a long time since we've had an industry day. I think it really does convey how important this particular procurement is. All of them are, but this one in particular is quite important. It's large, it's complex, it is challenging. It's incredibly important. And again, these are both public-facing programs. So we appreciate your time today. Looking forward to engagement with you all. And again, if you have questions, I think Stuart and Rhonda are the ones. And I do want to say I really appreciate the team of IRIS employees and OIT employees who actually put this on. Jessica, Vanessa, these things don't happen easily. So well done on the part of them, making sure hopefully we got you all in a very, good way and we send you back out. And I'll just restate, I think what Rhonda said, please don't go roaming. Where's Luke? He's already roaming. Please don't go roaming. If you're caught roaming, then that gets us in trouble. That gets you in trouble. So we just need to have an orderly exit from the building. But again, really appreciate your interest and participation today. Thank you.